Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Clark. I'm the 2020 president for Spokane Association of Realtors. Welcome to the Friday Roundtable Zoom call. And today we have the benefit and graces of Annie Fitzsimmons, Washington Realtor attorney, to help us work on easing into phase 2, which we just found out this morning that we are now in phase 2 for Spokane County. And those of you not in Spokane, I guess about close to 2/3 of the state now is in phase 2 or will be very soon. So today's moderator is Darren Watkins, Government Affairs Director for Spokane Association of Realtors. And we are recording the proceedings today for our members' benefit to view later, should they not be available right now. And so without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Darren.
And just a quick note, kind of a housekeeping measure. If you have a question, go ahead and just post it here on the web chat. We don't use the Q&A function because we have too many people on the line to do that. We can try to get to those questions. Annie Fitzsimmons, you have been great to help us out through all of this. And so now that we officially have word that we have entered phase 2 operations, give us some help on, and let's just talk a bit about what that means for realtor offices and what we can do differently now than we could under phase 1. Annie?
Okay, so phase 2, this is like a huge day of celebration if you're a commercial real estate broker. I don't have to tell any of you that. You already know it. I'm sure that you can feel stronger today. The commercial real estate brokerage services are back on, and there are no limits with the type of commercial brokerage services you can provide. There are, of course, limits, protocols in place for commercial brokers that are identical to residential real estate brokers. And so we'll get to the protocols in a second. But when I say that all commercial real estate brokerage services are back in action, I'm referring to sales, property management, and leasing, and that is for improved and unimproved property. So all commercial real estate brokerage services are available. The same protocols apply to both commercial and residential. And those protocols require brokers to still try and provide all brokerage services virtually to the extent you can. However, when in-person brokerage services are required, they can be provided with the following limitations. All access to seller's property has to be by appointment only. No more than a total of 3 people in phase 2. So that's an improvement over phase 1. In phase 1, you can only have 2 people on site. In phase 2, you can have 3 people on site. Spokane, my memory of Spokane is that you guys are a little bit different because the Spokane MLS gives MLS keys to maybe some inspectors. Do I remember that correctly?
That is correct.
Maybe even some appraisers. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and say what I was going to say, and then I'll tell you why it's a little bit different for Spokane. For most of the state, it's an easy rule to say no more than 3 people, and one of those people is going to be the real estate broker. And so that would mean, in the case of an inspection, for example, you could now have the buyer along with the broker, the inspector, and the buyer could be there, whereas in phase 1, you could only have the broker and the inspector. Spokane has always been unique with respect to that answer because I don't know if there's any other MLSs in the state that give keys to inspectors. If there are, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but you guys do, at least to some inspectors. And so in that case, the inspector can use their own key, by appointment of course, go into the seller's home, and then in phase 2, the inspector could bring 2 buyers with them if there are 2 buyers and they both want to be part of the inspection process. The key difference, and just to clarify this, the reason why there's a distinction between Spokane, who gives keys to inspectors, and the rest of the state who doesn't, is because of the agency law provision that says that a broker must timely account for a consumer's property entrusted to their care effectively. So if the broker is using their key, that's the big deal. If the broker is using their own MLS key to access the property, then the broker must be present in the property anytime a third party is in there, whether it's the consumer or the inspector or otherwise. But if the inspector can use their MLS key to go in, then broker you don't have to be there at all because you didn't provide access, you have no duty to timely account. So there's that distinction. Okay, so in phase 2, by appointment only, 3 people can be in the property. And then the other big change is that everybody wears cloth face coverings. And you can, of course, wear a traditional face mask if you have that available to you. But the governor's order specifically says a cloth face covering, which is not a medical grade mask. You can wear the medical grade mask, but you could also tie a bandana around the health department regulations set the tone for this requirement. And they say that you're supposed to cover your nose and your mouth with something, with a piece of cloth of some sort. And it could be a bandana, it could be an old t-shirt, for goodness sake. So there is literally no expense associated with this requirement. Nobody should have to buy anything in order to meet this requirement. So
there's been some questions about that. Why? Because typically if we looked at the phase 2 gathering, it says 5 people. So how do you know how that worked out? Was that something specific from the governor's office as to 3 people, or just because there's some question is how come not 5 and why 3? How did that come about? Do we know?
Well, I was not. So okay. The Washington Realtors Government Affairs Department were around the clock with the governor's office. They weren't literally working around the clock, but they were available around the clock because they could only meet when the governor's folks were ready to meet with them, right? So when the governor's folks were ready to meet them, they advocated the realtor position or the realtor requests on all of these issues. And to answer your question specifically, the difference in 3 versus 5, I'm guessing, because I wasn't there for those discussions, but here's where having learned a little bit about kind of the flavor of the governor's concerns, here's where I bet that came from, the 3 versus, the more generic 5. The governor is very concerned that when real estate brokers are inside of a seller's fairly confined space, a home, after all, you're going to be in bedrooms, you're going to be in living rooms, you're going to be in small spaces together, walking down hallways, the ability to maintain that 6 feet separation while the broker is keeping an eye on the consumers, making sure they're not opening the seller's cabinet doors, making sure they're not touching surfaces, all of that stuff. So in other words, the broker has to be in control of what's happening inside that seller's house. The more people you have, the more difficult that's going to be, and the closer people are going to necessarily be together because you've got more people. So I think the idea of having a broker, and really the idea was a broker and 2 buyers going through seller's house together. Broker can keep an eye on what's happening, and can also, with only 3 people, you can probably maintain that 6 feet of separation between everybody. Gotcha. Again, I wasn't there. I can't tell you exactly where that came from, but I would bet it's something like that.
Sounds good. And we do have some audio challenges right now. You're kind of coming in and out, but we're getting the great information. So we do want to keep this going on. Now, there are a couple of little quirks almost, if you will, when I look through the guidelines. And by the way, if you want to see specifically those guidelines, we can put that address up. We have 2 references for you to look at. The first one will be the governor's direction, and then Washington Realtors put out some additional guidance today on the FAQs, which I thought was really important. So just so we're clear, this now means we can go back to doing buyer walkthroughs, right? Because we could do that with the at the final or the inspection. Did I hear you say that correctly? Yes. We're back to doing that, 3 people, okay? And then and so
you could do it with 2 people.
Does this mean anything different when it comes now to adding back in some of the other traditional things like stagers or signs, photographers, even doing repairs? Does that change now under phase 2?
Yes, under phase 1, sign installers got left out of the mix, and at no point were sign installers ever formally allowed to go on a seller's property and install signs. I know it happened all over the state. I don't think anybody ever was terribly concerned about it from the governor's office, because by the nature of the work, sign installers are pretty remote and they're working outside. But they were not part of phase 1. They are now part of phase 2. But as phase 1 had developed, some of the other third parties that you mentioned were brought back into the mix anyway. Stagers were allowed to operate as phase 1 unfolded. Stagers were allowed to start operating again. Movers were allowed to start operating again. One of the things that's probably most important to the functioning of transactions is that the governor's office is allowing the kind of the traditional repairs that sellers need to do prior to closing, whether it's buyer generated, lender generated, appraiser generated, wherever it comes from, kind of the very traditional type of repairs. I'm not saying that if the seller was required to, build a bathroom addition onto the house, that wouldn't necessarily be allowed, but the traditional type of repairs that sellers can do, governor has green-lighted that so that transactions can close. At no point was the objective from the governor to stop a transaction in process for the sake of stopping a transaction.
And just so that because part of your audio was broken up there, I have to make sure this clear, is that the traditional repairs that we've sort of been trying to be creative around for the last few months, we can now go back to that under phase 2, that those traditional small repairs can now be done as part of the closing of the property. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and that was actually okay in the tail end of phase 1. So if anybody from a phase 1 county is listening, the contractors were actually covered under a separate declaration from the governor altogether. Okay. But as contractors were allowed to come back to work, they have their own protocols when they're doing outright construction, but the governor has allowed them to also work on seller's home to pick up the minor issues that typically accompany closing.
Sounds good.
Would it be helpful if I just shut down my video and called in on my cell phone? Would that be better?
Yeah, we might try that. We'll see if that works. And I'm going to repost. It looks like the part of the email link or the web link that I put on here. There we go. I didn't come through for the governor's guidelines. We'll make that happen. One of the things that I thought was interesting, Tom, we can talk about this while we wait for Annie, was that business cards.
Wait a second, Darren, let me interrupt you for a second. I just need to say that when I dial in, whoever, I'm going to be dialing in as an attendant, not as a panelist, so somebody's going to have to let me in. So just watch for my cell phone number, please.
Ed's on top of this. He's our resident technical guru. He'll make that happen for you.
No pressure, Edward.
So under the guidelines, one thing that I was kind of surprised at, I hadn't really thought about it, was about business cards. Traditionally, whenever we go to visit a home or we drop by, we've been leaving business cards on the counter. Under these guidelines, we're asked not to do that because obviously because of concerns over surfaces and leaving behind anything. So that is a change that I saw directly that was different between the guidelines from Washington State Realtors versus the guidelines that were issued specific from the governor's office. Just some things to think about. And we're talking about the phase 2 real estate requirements specifically. They're about 5 pages long. And they do talk about a number of things happening when it comes to opening up the office. I thought the guidance was fairly clear about, if you don't need to bring them in, if they have been working from home and things have been working out okay, maybe that's something for now, at least under phase 2, that we should consider continuing on that pathway. There are some specific things for like posters, for example. There's a poster that you're supposed to put up regarding safety and health issues under phase 2. Washington Realtors actually is working on a poster as we speak, and they hope to have that out for us next week. Just something that we can then easily print off and post in our offices when it comes to making sure that we are there. Let's see here.
I'm back on the phone.
CDC. Oh, there we are. Yeah, sorry to the folks that are concerned about the number of, there are a lot of them. And I wish, and I think Washington Realtors has done a pretty good job of summarizing everything, but just note that their frequently asked question link is also 9 pages long. I'm not sure this is in any way going to be easy. Would you agree, Annie, that this may not be easy, but at least it gets us back into the office spaces?
Yeah, and honestly, the best advice that I think I can give you, other than what Darren just said, which is there's a whole lot of protocols, not one of which on its own is complicated, but altogether there are a whole bunch of protocols that you'd have to follow in order to open your office. My first thought for brokers, for designated brokers to consider when they're thinking about opening their office is, how important is it to you to open your office now versus, you know, I don't know when Spokane County is going to merge into phase 3, but when the governor originally introduced his 4-phase approach, he had indicated then that there would be 3 weeks in between the evolution of each phase.
Right.
So if we're talking about 3 weeks, my first question, if I were the DB, would be, how important is it for me to open my office right now rather than 3 weeks from now? I've been getting along, you know, maybe not perfectly, but I've been getting along for the last 8 weeks. Can I continue to get along in the same way rather than endure all of the protocols that accompany opening the office in phase 2? Now, what I can't promise you is that those protocols aren't also going to be part of phase 3. I don't know what phase 3 is going to look like. I just know that there's a bunch of protocols for you to adhere to. And I did miss part of this, but I heard Darren say that Washington Realtors is trying to help designated brokers develop some of the tools that they need. And Darren, I heard you reference the poster. I don't know if you mentioned the COVID-19 management plan or not, but every firm will have to have a management plan. That has been drafted. It will be available early next week for designated brokers to print off and incorporate, adopt, if you will, as your own COVID-19 plan. And it includes all of the required protocols, and they're immense. I mean, let me see if I can tell you, if I can read to you what it looks like. So the COVID-19 Exposure Control Mitigation and Recovery Plan. This comes directly out of the governor's order. So none of this is Washington Realtors imposed. This is directly from the governor's orders. So I'm just going to read some of the bullet points to you. You're familiar with the first one: maintain 6-foot separation, moving furniture as necessary, marking the floor as necessary to ensure distancing, use barriers like the plexiglass to create distance when 6 feet distance is not possible, require all clients make appointments for in-person meetings in the office, limit access to the office through only one door, small conference rooms that don't allow for social distancing must be closed, occupancy of the office has to be capped at 50%, hygiene and sanitation, hand sanitizer has to be available and distributed throughout the office. The office has to be on a more robust cleaning schedule. Tissues and trash cans be made available throughout the work site. HVAC system filters will be changed frequently, and on and on. I'm about halfway through the protocols right now, reading, well, no, I'm about a fourth of the way through the protocols, reading some of them and not all of them, just to give you an idea of what they are.
And to be clear, this guidance, though, specifically talks about cloth masks. We in no way are asking for the introduction of any medical grade mask, correct?
Correct.
So would that be just, I mean, what would you think would qualify as a cloth mask? Like a bandana, would that work? Or something we can make? Or
a bandana, like I think I said before, you could use just an old t-shirt, anything, literally any piece of material. The health department protocols say that it can be fabric. I mean, it has to be, if you're using a cloth one, that it can be sorry, I want to read the specific language. Oh gosh, I'm not finding it at the moment. That the cloth can be cotton, linen, or something else. I can't remember what it is, but anyhow, something like an old t-shirt or a bandana is perfect.
So open houses are still not allowed under phase 2, are they?
Open houses are not allowed under phase 2. And I will say that the one place that, so here's a little interesting something. The governor's office called one of our government affairs people the other day, and I'm not making that up. Literally, the governor's office called one of our government affairs people the other day and said, hey, this staff person from the governor's office, I was driving by a house the other day that's for sale, gave them the listing, listing firms information, listing brokers information, and there were a whole bunch of people, no social distancing happening out in the front yard. thought you should be aware. And this was right after we'd announced the phase 2 protocols. So of course, our government affairs guy got on the phone with the designated broker at that firm. And as it turned out, it was a collection of movers and stagers gathered around the house, not real estate brokers or consumers. So that was the good news. But the be cautious news is people are watching. And the thing that we're hearing about more than anything else is with a wink, wink and a nod, nod. No, we're not doing an open house, when in fact we're absolutely doing an open house. And one of the ways I've heard about it is that a broker will advertise, I've got an open appointment to show this property on Sunday from noon to 5. If you'd like to take advantage of this appointment, stop by the house. Well, what does that sound like to you? Sounds like an open house, right? It violates the terms of the governor's order. I don't know what the consequences would be if that becomes an abused pattern by the industry. I'm sure if the industry in general started doing that, permissions would be revoked as far as the phase protocols. I'm not at all worried about us as an industry doing that. I don't see that happening at all based on any of the patterns from our members, but I do see a few outliers doing that. And then what's really infuriating to everybody else is the notion that, hey, we're all playing by the rules and this person isn't, and taking advantage of the system. And that makes all of us look bad. And it also makes me want to do the same thing so that I'm not losing business to that person who's breaking the rules. So my encouragement would be, again, to designated brokers, as it was when I made that first video that might be the Angry Annie video, as the Washington Realtor staff dubbed it. Designated brokers, do your best to control the situation. You're ultimately responsible for what the brokers licensed to your firms are doing. And so if with a wink, wink, nod, nod, brokers are quote unquote not holding an open house, but they really are, intervene and stop that practice, because that's where you are going to get reported. There's a governor's, I'm calling it a snitch line, because that's basically what it is. And people will get turned into that. And the Department of Licensing, when we asked the Department of Licensing what's the best way to report people who are violating the governor's orders, the Department of Licensing said they're not taking complaints directly. Instead, they're being fed those complaints from the governor's office. So when people are reported through the governor's report line, hotline for that, for violations, if they're real estate related, the governor's office is turning those over to the Department of Licensing, and then the Department of Licensing is planning on disciplining in light of that.
And so, Annie, one of the questions that's on our chat line, it certainly makes sense then if you were to put out even a message that said, we'll be available from 10 until 2 by appointment only, give us a call. I mean, that would certainly seem to me to fit the requirements just by making it by appointment.
Yeah, if the broker made appointments, if a broker said, I have a window of appointments available from 10 to 2, make your appointment so that I can schedule and stagger the showings, and I can have no more than 3 people in at a time, and I can wipe down surfaces in between people and those kind of things, that's fine. There's no reason why a listing broker can't have 5 appointments in one day, properly distanced. And so if that's what's happening, okay, that's not what we're seeing in some cases. So again, designated brokers, you know the difference. You know what I'm talking about. This is not tough to figure out. Make sure that your brokers are adhering to the protocols.
I mean, the legal hotline has been a really great tool during this whole process. And you have certainly gotten a lot of opportunities to speak with. What are some of the things you're hearing from brokers and realtors now as it comes to conversations about phase 2? What are some of the biggest challenges and questions you have?
Well, phase 2 is so new that I'm not sure I really had an opportunity to hear all of the questions about phase 2. Right now, at the very beginning, the questions I'm hearing the most about are, what is this face cloth requirement all about? You know, who's going to provide us with these face masks, et cetera, et cetera. So dispelling the notion that a cloth face covering is dispelling the notion that a cloth face covering is a medical grade face mask. That's what I've been trying to focus on most heavily the first few days. In fact, I think that I can't remember now. We have a question and answer of the week coming out, I think maybe even today. I can't remember what the question. I remember what it was. I'll tell you something that was a kind of a big deal in phase 1 counties. This is not your all's problem, but if you are surrounded by any phase 1 counties and you need to travel into a phase 1 county to sell a property, this will be an issue for you. But anyhow, the cloth face coverings is an issue I've heard about. The other one that I've heard about, and this has really rubbed some King County, Pierce County, Snohomish County folks the wrong way. They're still in phase 1. Mm-hmm. And until what day I think it was Monday, Tuesday, I can't remember even now when it was, when the phase 2 orders came into effect, until then, phase 1 counties, brokers weren't required to wear face masks. And now that phase 2 has created more flexibility for phase 2 counties, all of a sudden phase 1 county brokers are having to wear cloth face coverings as well. And so we've heard some pushback on that. How come we in phase 1, who can still only take one other person into the property with us and can't sell commercial real estate, how come we all of a sudden now have to wear cloth face coverings also when we're dealing with the public? And the governor's office was really clear on that answer. And it goes something like this: as the state emerges more into the phase 2 protocols across the state, more and more counties loosen their guidelines more and more. There's going to be more coming and going of just people out in the community and more interactions of people with each other. And there is certainly no barrier between phase 2 and phase 1 counties. So the people from phase 2 who are mingling more are going to enter phase 1 counties. And so the governor's thought process, as I understood it, is that just because there's going to be more interaction among everybody across the state, the more we can get people to wear masks and inhibit the exposure from one person to the other of airborne virus, the better. So that's why folks who are even still in phase 1 counties are being required to wear cloth face coverings, even though they're not getting the benefit of the more relaxed protocols.
As we move into phase 2, it seems like there is a greater emphasis now on managing and watching people within the building, trying to limit the number of people that come in, contact, plexiglass. And I got to thinking about this. This is a different kind of a mindset. So for example, what would the recommendation be from Washington Realtors if you have someone in your office who comes down or is exposed to COVID-19? They come back to you, to the boss, and say, hey, sorry, I've come down with this. What would your recommendation be for that broker under these guidelines?
So the governor's guidelines actually cover this issue. They mandate the response. Let me see how quickly I can find that. The response is,
well, if I'm reading this correctly, it says that the employers should inform all the fellow employees of the possible exposure, but try and maintain confidentiality, because we have guidelines from the ADA that still require that. But they should inform their employees on how to proceed with the basic health recommendations, as Tom just demonstrated.
So there's two components of it. There's that. There's, putting other people on notice that they may have been exposed, but again, protecting the confidentiality of the person who's sick. There's also, what do you do with your office space? And that's what's covered by the governor's protocols. It says, make sure any individuals who are sick stay home or immediately go home if they feel or appear sick. Goes on to say, cordon off any areas where an individual with probable or confirmed COVID-19 illness worked, touched surfaces, etc., until the area and equipment is cleaned and sanitized, following the cleaning guidelines set by the CDC to deep clean and sanitize. So you've got the contact tracing component of it, and I'm using that very generically because I'm not really suggesting that you're going to have to go through a full contact tracing spectrum, but but there's that part that you would want to let people who've been potentially impacted know to the extent that you can. And then there's the other part of it, which is the CDC required deep cleaning of that area, any area that that person might have contacted.
Sure, sure. On the guidance from Washington Realtors, I do want to read something that's at the very end and give you an opportunity to talk about this. It basically says this: there are false rumors and misinformation being circulated. Many brokers have acted in reliance on that information to their embarrassment and their detriment. That's a pretty powerful statement on the guidance. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and you'll notice that that one is dated March 26th. We didn't update that protocol with the recent updates that we did. There was a time when brokers were, for example, being told that no, construction can go forward. We're an essential service, and so we're allowed to. You can hire us to make the repairs at seller's home at a time when that was not allowed. There were model home brokers who were being told by their employers, well, the sellers, if you will, the new construction folks, that because they were an essential service, which they were for a very short time, and not really even broadly, but that's what they were telling folks, that also means that our listing brokers are essential and you're allowed to continue holding open houses and holding our models open. Not true. So those kind of things, stagers, different people were being told different things by stagers are being told different things by brokers, things like that.
Right. How do you think we've managed this so far? Because I don't know, from your perspective, from a legal perspective, it has to be a constant update, because every day it seems like things are changing.
Yeah, well, there was about a 2-week period there in March, as you can imagine, that things were crazier than I've ever imagined anything ever being on the hotline. No time was ever busier, which I've told a few people this story. I think it's funny because friends and family who know what I do contacted me around that time and said, well, boy, you must have nothing to do because people can't sell real estate, which, was kind of ironic to me because I'd never been busier ever because our industry was in a state of crisis. But there was, after people got used to the phase 1 protocols and being able to be back in business with the protocols in effect, then the hotline kind of, moderated and became much more normal for my purposes. It's gotten really busy again, as you can imagine, with the introduction of the phase 2 protocols, but I expect that to level off also. What's been the most encouraging thing to me, and I hope that this is true for every real estate broker in the industry, what's been the most encouraging thing for me is that throughout all of this, the regular hotline call questions about Form 35 and Form 22A and how do we draft this provision and do we have a binding agreement, those calls never stopped. Those questions never stopped coming. And that's because for the most part, our industry, while I think that buyers and sellers maybe lost a little bit of momentum during the process in some cases, many brokers I've spoken to have said, I'm as busy now as I can be. I've got everything I can do to do. My business, it took a little hit a speed bump, but boy, are we back in action now. And that's what I'm really hearing most of all. What I'm not hearing, to answer your question about how do I think that as an industry we've done, I think we've done phenomenally, because what I'm not hearing is from the governor's office, for example, a hesitancy to allow the real estate industry to emerge into a set of phase 2 protocols along with the county. The governor could have kept the real estate industry in phase 1 protocols even when the county itself emerged into phase 2. That could have happened, but it didn't happen because there's not been any widespread abuse, to my knowledge, of the protocols. And I'm as proud as I've ever been, and I love the Realtor family. Anybody who's talked to me knows that. I've never been more proud of my association with the Realtor family than I am as it has come through this crisis.
That's fantastic to hear. So now, just let's recap some of these things so we make sure the points. We're in phase 2 now, especially here in Spokane County. Not all counties are that way, so you have to make sure if you cross boundaries between phase 1 and phase 2, the rules are a little bit different. This now expands the opportunity for commercial folks to have the same opportunities as residential. We still don't have open houses, and we can now have up to 3 people at a time in the house, but there's still some protocols. Real estate offices can open, but there are a number of guidelines that need to be followed. Washington Realtors are hoping to put out by next week not only the poster that needs to be posted, but some management plans that can become a nice template to use for phase 2. And are there anything more specific to that, Annie, that we really need to make sure people know about as we move into phase 2?
Yeah, I'm not on the development end at Washington Realtors. I know that the association is working hard to put together as much within they're calling it a toolbox, as much within a designated broker's toolbox as they possibly can to facilitate designated brokers in reopening their offices. I don't know, honestly, what's going to be in that toolbox. I know that the management plan, I know that some of the posters are going to be in that box. I don't know what else it would be, and I think I'm probably using box figuratively as opposed to literally, because I'm sure it will be an email download is what it will really be.
Right.
So I don't know exactly what will be available to you through that, but I do know that Washington Realtors is working hard to try and help the designated brokers who want to open.
I put the web links here, and they're easy to look at as well online to search for them. Both Washington Realtors have a great frequently asked question list that includes a lot of these issues with phase 2. They also have, this is directly from the governor's office, without my notes, of course, to talk specific about real estate requirements under COVID-19 in phase 2. That's a great document for us to reference as well. And stay tuned, right? I mean, because while this is the rules for today, I'm pretty sure things will probably change as they have almost weekly. Wouldn't you say, Annie?
Absolutely. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows when the next change is going to come? Certainly with phase 3, I'm anticipating that there will be changes, but it's entirely possible that the phase 2 protocols carry over into phase 3. Maybe nothing changes for the real estate industry as the county goes from phase 2 to phase 3. Maybe a lot changes. So you're absolutely right. You just like me, you've got to stay tuned, and we'll all learn together where we're headed.
Sounds great. Tom, any thoughts or questions here you want to talk with Annie about?
No, I don't think so. Annie has a 2:30 appointment, and she spent about 10 minutes longer with us than she said she would. So, Annie, thank you very much. We're honored to have your presence and your insight today. Thank you for your time. Thank
you so much for inviting me, and congratulations, Spokane, on becoming phase 2. Well done.
Yeah. And we'll let it go, and Darren and I can carry on a little conversation here about some of the recent stats and where we're at in the local market for those of you that want to stick around for a few minutes, and then we'll sign off. So anyway, good news. You know, one thing to keep in mind, and I don't know that Annie specified it, that we're in phase 2. If we were to go to another county to show a house that's in phase 1, we play by their rules. So just so everybody knows, just because you're coming from phase 2 doesn't mean you can carry that over into a phase 1. Just something to keep in mind. And then, of course, the idea of open houses versus making appointments. The appointments have to be made in advance so people don't stack up on the curb. That's the whole idea of the appointments. So it's a big deal. So let's talk a little bit about this month's statistics. I'm always kind of curious where the market is and what we're doing. Inventory is down. Listings are down. We're down about 18% for the first three weeks of the month compared to last year at this time. And then closed sales are down 16% currently. So volume's down a little bit. Hard to say about pendings, because pendings, we were measuring contingent inspection last year at this time versus pending inspection this year. So it appears the pendings are down a little bit, or excuse me, it appears the pendings are up a little bit, but it's not apples to apples. So it's a little bit of a challenge. Year to date, lockbox openings are down 20%. Last month though, they were down considerably more, 37%. So there's a lot more showings, even though there's fewer options for folks. Inventories, you know, new listings are down 16% or 18%, excuse me. So that's kind of a big deal. And I anticipate, based on activity that I've seen personally in the last week and a half, I think we're going to see inventory come up considerably. Folks that have been sitting on the fence waiting to put their house on the market, I believe we're going to start, thinking forward instead of thinking backward, because we've all been kind of thinking about going and hunkering down in the basement rather than going outside. So I think that's going to open up a little bit personally.
Well, the NAR report we had last week showed that a lot of homeowners that were thinking about putting their house on the market actually spent this time frame hitting Home Depot pretty hard and making repairs and changes and updates and sprucing to make their homes ready to market. And even James Young, we had on a few weeks ago, he was even thinking that to anticipate an increase, if you will, of listings. And so we'll have to see if that really does come true here in the weeks to come.
Yeah. I think we will. And actually the last day or two, it's been surprising with the increase in the numbers on the hot sheet. So that time will tell. It could be an anomaly. It could be a trend. We'll know when we have the benefit of 2020 hindsight. Get that? 2020 hindsight? Yeah. Okay. Never mind.
In 2020.
That's right. That's exactly right. New members also, by the way, are down, in case you're wondering about the SAR, the numbers and things like that. But I understand that the testing sites have been down, the licensing. So, obviously, as long as they're down, it's going to affect the number of people coming into the business. So it's not all gloom and doom. And actually, going into phase 2 is a bonus. It's a plus. It should make us all a little bit more flexible and maybe relax some moods and attitudes and things like that. And it's good news.
And for brokers who have perhaps taken out a PPP loan, the Paycheck Protection Program, for loans like that are looking for ways to get reimbursed or to have that forgiven, those guidance just came out late last week, and we have those available also on our website. It's just something for us to check out. And, I was just looking at some state numbers and other categories, and 2 things for us to consider. The first one is that real estate has always led any economy out of a recession. But number 2, we're in the state facing 30% of folks in the state are receiving some form of unemployment benefits. And so it's a difficult time, and so things could be a lot worse, I guess, is what I'm casting it. It's not great for us yet, but it's, I guess, just to count our blessings as we have them.
Well, and I think between the stimulus and the unemployment, the extensions of the unemployment and the pandemic unemployment assistance, those have kept a lot of people's feet out of the fire. The people that would be in dire straits, a lot of folks that would be in dire straits right now are doing okay. Obviously, they'd like to get back to work. We all would. But it could be a lot more devastating if it weren't for those programs.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So anything, Darren? Are we done?
That's it. We'll try to stay with these Friday gatherings as long as the information warrants it. And, when we started doing this, we said, well, we'll just do it while there's changes that are happening to our industry. And now this is number 7 for us. I think
I think we're on 8.
Number 8? Okay.
Yeah, but who's counting? Right?
As I've always said in my old industry, stay tuned.
Right, yeah. Well, the only thing constant is change, right?
That's always guaranteed.
There we go. Thank you. Everybody have a wonderful Friday. Have a nice weekend. Have a great Memorial Day. And please stay safe. Thank you.